Loa and Ho'olaus on Oahu. Thank you for being here in person and online.
I wanted to give thanks to Buffalo Child for honoring us with ceremony. The late elder Dave Crushane from Canada was very much a guide to many generations of people as they began their journey of caring for land and waters in Canada. And he very much stressed that it is good to begin your talks with ceremony. Ceremony allows you to open your mind, your hearts, and your hands, that you can put them together and do the work that you have to do. So Shoni then to Buffalo Child for the honoring of beginning this deliberation and gathering with ceremony. We also wanted to honor that we are on the traditional homelands of the Ute Mountain people. Shoni then for the stewardship and caring for the lands and waters for many centuries. To care for that the land that we are walking and sharing our time and life energy on for these days together. Sho.
So this side event is put on by two organizations, the Canadian Mountain Network and the Mountain Sentinels Network, and I've had the very great honor as one of the co-leads of Mountain Sentinels to serve on the Research Management Committee with Hudea of the Canadian Mountain Network, and I've been so honored to learn from her and from all of the wonderful work that they're doing. So this is the Canadian Mountain Network, and their purpose here as a national nonprofit supports resilience and health of Canada's mountain peoples and places through research partnerships based on Indigenous and Western ways of knowing that inform decision-making and action. The other group represented here is the Mountain Sentinels Network. I'll give a brief history a little bit later in this panel, but we're aiming to build an alliance of equitable, inclusive partnerships that learn from each other, incorporate multiple worldviews and knowledges, and co-create knowledge and innovation, and together advance a shared vision for catalyzing pathways to sustainability in mountain regions worldwide. And again, I'll talk about some of our partners. So I would like to ask Tiffany Pyette to share a poem.
Thank you. Do you need it closer? Okay, thanks. This poem was part of my project for the Mountain Sentinels Fellowship, and it was co-written with a member of my community, and I'll go ahead and read it now. This house feels tight. I want to go for a drive and roll down the windows. Mountains are more than ground. I need to see the arms, older than bones, that are open to embrace me. When I've been away, driving back, once the land starts to bunch up like big mossy blankets, that's how I know I've come home. I met these mountains in a life that used to hurt, but they held me and my children. Closer? Okay. But they held me and my children. These mountains that have seen everything, pulled up from ancient ocean floor. This place is natural and beautiful and peaceful, and our music has room to reverberate across the fields and up the sliced and mined rock and around the redbuds. I know people cut each other deep, trying to find their own footing. Not everything is safe, not everything is soft, but I want it to be. People don't trust outsiders much here. We're self-reliant and overprotective, but no one's ever a stranger for long. We don't have a lot, but we'd share it. and no one ever goes without getting fed. I'll fix you a plate if you're hungry.
Thank you. If you want to read more of Tiffany's poetry, there is a book by our table outside, and she was, interviewing people about safety in the mountains in Appalachia. It's really spectacular. So our panel today is about braiding knowledges, and so we just wanted to explain briefly what we mean by that. We mean honoring and finding ways to weave together diverse knowledges, practices, and learning that support sustainability. Diverse knowledges include ancestral knowledge balanced with informed experiential understanding of a given place. Braiding knowledges also incorporates insights, knowledge from local knowledge, citizen science, and foremost Western scientific approaches, such as comparative assessments of changing mountain conditions around the world that can complement Indigenous and local knowledges. This approach aims to support and strengthen vibrant mountain communities, livelihoods that respect nature, all our natural relatives and the earth, and help to restore degraded lands. By braiding knowledge, the goal is to learn from each other, share approaches that foster sustainability, and increase understanding. This allows us to benefit mutually rather than duplicating effort and missing opportunities to share sustainable methods. By braiding knowledges, we aim to support systematic transformations to planetary sustainability. The whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts. And then just some of the key messages that we want to share. It's hard to really put our messages down in just like 3 bullet points, so we expanded a little bit, but we hope through the words of these panelists, you will take away our key message that pathways for sustainable mountain communities and environments center ancestral and science-based knowledges, recognize all our relations and ceremony, let research be guided by reconciliation, work within ethical space and co-create knowledge, invest in youth, address threats and historical injustices of mountains on the margin, and support mountain community resilience and our capacity to work together. So with that, I would like to ask Lawrence to share a bit with us about.
It helps if you don't step on it. So over the evolution of the Canadian Mountain Network, we've learned a lot. I do not want to leave you with the impression or the idea that it's easy to bridge and co-produce knowledge. Part of the reason why it is hard to do it is that these are complete societal systems that shape who and how people have interacted with the environment for thousands of years. Depending on the complexity of the community's governance systems, it could take considerable time for them to process and consider the questions that you're posing. These systems create boundaries and responsibilities that guide all aspects of their livelihoods. Of course, these systems have been and continue to be disrupted by colonialism and oppressive policies, yet they offer critical insights into decision-making and consideration structures based upon foundations that would different foundations than what drives our systems today. At the core of a sustainable future is learning from these Indigenous knowledge systems. This is what is at the core of the work of the Canadian Mountain Network, and hopefully in the future, Braiding Knowledges Canada.
And we're trying to get 2 corrected images up. One thing that we've learned is to be patient and kind to each other when we make mistakes. And I put 2 slides in that shouldn't be here, and instead we should have 2 figures. So hopefully they'll come up in a minute or 2.
When we were growing up in our community, in my community that I was raised in the fall time, everybody would come back from hunting and fishing and trapping and gathering, and we'd all make sure that whatever we had, that we made sure it was looked after for all of the winter. Put everything away in a good way. And then we'd sit down with each other and tell each other what we were going to plan to do in the winter ahead, where we were going to travel, which families we're going to be traveling with. And then we look at each other and we just say, gee, it's good to see you, and just have a good visit together. This kind of work that you're doing here is the kind of way that we've been trying to work at the Canadian Mountain Network as well. Gathering and sharing, looking at what we have, and then preparing for what we have to do in the next winter. And then celebrating our time that we are sharing some of our life force together. After the winter is done, meet again in the springtime. Share what it is that you were able to do in the winter, where you traveled, what you saw. Maybe part of the mountains sloughed down up in that creek valley. Maybe the water, because of the water level dropping because of different glacial river drain-offs, that the spring waters are coming on the land in a different way. Or else you saw an animal that you weren't ever expecting to see, like a cougar. And you share all of this together, and then you say that this is what we're going to do in the summer. This is where we're going to go and hunt, fish, trap, and gather. Thank you, Buffalo Child. We said thank you earlier for your honoring us with ceremony yesterday morning. After you've prepared yourself for that, what your plan is of where you're going to go for the summer, and then you look at each other and you celebrate your time together before you go off on the land again. So the kind of work that you're doing here, you're doing it on a global scale. We're doing work on a national scale, and you as well on global work. You need to have that kind of thinking of sitting back and looking at what you've done, planning to where you go, and then celebrate your time together, because not every day is work, work, work. So.
Yeah, it's never fun following Gudea. It's just more of a thought as we were listening today. While there's a lot of recognition for the need for science-based decision-making processes, this is only one type of knowledge and approach. Within the Canadian context, there's a growing recognition that multiple knowledge systems are needed to support sustainable development. These needs, of course, need to be balanced with where Indigenous communities are at and with their rights.
In 2022 to 2032 is the United Nations International Decade of Indigenous Languages. When the pipeline was going to come from up in Alaska through our community to bring oil down here into this part of the United States, we had hearings in our community. And my mom, she's 93. I had a chance, I was having coffee and talking with her this morning. I asked her, what you doing? She said, oh, I'm just helping those guys down there. They're making drums. They're making drums with caribou skin and moose skin. So I'm just sitting down, make sure they do it right. So she's still active and busy at 93. she was explaining to the commissioners on the pipeline that the way that you're looking at the land, you look at the land from paper. You understand the land from paper. And that sort of sets how you look at and care for this land. I look at the land, and I know the land like my hand right here. I know where to go and get fish in the springtime. I know where to go get berries, not just right here, 80 miles down that way, 80 miles that way, 80 miles over that way. And I walk lots of that land. She asked those commissioners to look and try to understand that land, to take off that paper way of understanding the land and look at the land as being part of the land and as being part of the water. So during the International Decade of Indigenous Languages, begin to learn some of those place names from the people that have carried that ancestral knowledge through centuries. Learn those place names, because those place names do carry that kind of knowledge. Good. Joni then.
I guess in terms of some practical advice that both Gadi and I were co-authored a paper on. It's called Toward Reconciliation, 10 Calls to Action for Natural Scientists Working in Canada. There was a need for this paper, and Gadi has often said that quite a few times. But yet it was conceived from a place of frustration. It lays out a path for how research can be done better with Indigenous communities. It's not prescriptive to respect the wishes and potential directions of Indigenous communities. Rather, we wanted to bring the commonalities to the table to show there is a better path. So I encourage you, if you have not had a chance, it's published in Facets, and yeah, give it a read.
Thank you so much for your insights and your deep experiences and sharing those 10 points with the broader community. So myself and a few of the folks here on the end, we represent this Mountain Sentinels network. I'm just going to give you a little history of our network. We started about a decade ago. We were actually funded by the MRI to hold a workshop on social ecological systems in mountains. So you can see the former director and the old logo of MRI in this slide. And at that point, a decade ago, there was a lot more biophysical science, and it wasn't working together with social and humanities. So we started doing that, and then we got some funding from the National Science Foundation to do some synthesis work across mountains. And for example, we have some work across 57 sites globally, and we've got a bunch of publications out by our booth there. But one thing that we found, for example, even though mountains are so different, is that across all of those 57 sites, policies affecting mountains are being made by those living outside the mountains. So how can the Mountain Partnership really work with and for and be led by local communities to remedy that governance situation? So we've got a bunch of research again that you can look at. We also have been exploring how and why different participatory processes work and don't work. We've got some education materials you can see in our website. We had a really successful fellowship program that we will continue, and you see some of our fellows sitting up on the stage, and you'll hear from them in a moment. We recently got some new funding, and you'll see we've got some 18 different networks involved, many of whom are represented here today, some of whom are not. We also have elders and youth and NGOs and some new cooperatives and local mountain businesses that have joined as well. I think I already went over what the aim is. And I'll just show you, 3 days ago, we actually had a summit downhill a bit in Basalt. And I'll just share a little bit of what that was like. We were very honored to have Hudea with us and participating and learning from her. We had both Native and Western facilitators. And then this is Larry Sespuch, who's an elder from the Ute Nation. And this is our co-PI. I should mention in this new phase, we have 2 co-leads that are Indigenous, one of whom is pictured there, Timberly Rowan, who's at the UC Denver, and she's of the Lumbee tribe. We had local sheep herders who showed us how to do their weavings with grass. And we had local coffee growers from Honduras. And it was just a really engaging process to really bring directly the mountain community members present, even if they didn't speak English. And there were many people we could not get visas for. But for people we couldn't get visas for example, a group from the Potato Park in Peru, a community joined us remotely. And we also had multiple generations. So this is Dominique David Chavez, who is also an Indigenous scholar and scientist at my university, Colorado State University, and she's also a co-leader of this initiative. And you can see she brought her kids. She was leading an exercise with her little son sleeping on her back. And so we really did appreciate that sharing of knowledge from our elders down to our youngest members. And we had a graphic facilitator, and so this is just a very compressed version of what we did over these 3 days, and we do have this printed out. We will have it on our website soon. And a lot of the outcomes we're still processing, but there was amazing relationship building, which was really the most important part, and developing of our core values and what we want to do together. And some of the outcomes from that meeting also are represented in our key messages for this session. So now I'd like to turn it over to Tuason Kwai, who is going to share with us some of his insights from his own mountain community and his message for the Mountain Partnership meeting.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Zui, for being here. I'm from Myanmar, Chin State, border with Bangladesh and India, and the western part of Myanmar. So before the pandemic, my mountain community were living under poverty. Over half of the population were living under poverty. And we have only one college and university. And in some area, there are no even a primary school. So like 99% of the village school do not have access to like clean drinking water and electricity. So like since the pandemic, it's almost like 3 years now, and schooling is closed. And unfortunately, in 2021, the military coup and like some armed conflict is happening across the country, including my mountain area. And 20% of my community members are displaced right now. They are looking for like refugee in India, but the Indian government is denying them. So they are trapped in the border area. So before the pandemic, like there were over 134,000 students in my province, my mountain community. But those children do not have access to education until today. And here we talk about the sustainable mountain community. But what I think is that we can't ignore the education of these children because they will be our leader. If we can't provide them education, we can't have like, how do we have a sustainable mountain community of people? So as I mentioned, we have only one university and college, and a lot of young people from my community don't have access to higher education. I was fortunate because my parents migrate to different city, and I'm able to have a degree. So I have a lot to give back my community. So young people in my community do not have even a vocational school. So what I feel is that we need to invest in vocational school for those who cannot go to school or those who do not have any education in the mountain area. And also investing in higher education for those who are able to go to school so that they will make impact a lot. And especially like my mountain community is very vulnerable in terms of climate because we don't have access to electricity, and we cannot ignore to cut the forest or the tree. We have to rely on cutting the tree to cook our living every day. But the problem is that many people do not have knowledge to replant the tree. Our mountain area is becoming deforested, and we were facing climate disaster every year. For example, in 2015, there was a torrential rain about 2 weeks, and over 6,000 hectares of our farm has been devastated. So, and over 55 houses were, not houses, village also displaced because of the climate issue. So, I want to request all the members here invest in environment education, especially in the mountain area, developing education climate related in the curriculum. At the same time, financially support those universities to plant tree every year annually, or something that can be done. So I think that's my message, and I want to talk if there is more question.
Thank you, Tuaswan Kai. Tiffany, would you like to share with us some of your stories from the mountains and a message to our mountain partnership today? Thank you.
Sure. Is the mic close enough this time? Okay. So I come from the Appalachian Mountains. I don't know how many of you have been there, but I come from a really small place that used to be owned by the coal company and hasn't had an industry since the coal company left. We recently had catastrophic flooding, and the majority of the people in my home are displaced. People are living in tents where their homes used to be. This climate disaster was compounded by the fact that extractive industry made us incredibly vulnerable to landslides. Whole homes were lost, people were killed because of direct effects of the coal mining industry. If I could impart one thing onto people, it's that Appalachia doesn't deserve to be given up on, and that there are so many opportunities for sustainable development in an area that has musical talent and foodways and natural beauty. There's so much more opportunity and so much more to us than people usually get to see. One thing that I loved about my project for the Mountain Sentinels Fellowship was that I was getting to give this really consensual way to bring out people's voices in the community that they felt good about, talking about some vulnerable things, about how you find safety and refuge in the place that you live, or if you don't find it, and why that is, and all of the different contributing factors to that. Appalachia is a hard place to be, but it is also the only place that my heart will ever feel home and feel happy. And I hope that in some way I can impart on you the love that I have for my mountain range that would ordinarily probably not be a part of these conversations in this space. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany. She's a poet through and through. Every word that comes out of her mouth is just very, very heartfelt. So thank you. And very powerful too. Katie, we'd love to hear from you.
I want to cry. I've got to know Tiffany and her story, and it's just and Kai and his story from his community. So I encourage you guys to talk with them afterwards because they're just so passionate. And I was joking with Tiffany earlier. We weren't really nervous about this, and I was like, I think it's because we're put in front of our community so often that it's just kind of expected that we talk. And for Hawaii, I can speak. We're raised, I'm from Hawaii, I'm Native Hawaiian, I didn't say that. But we're taught from a young age that we represent our communities. And although there may be one other resident here from Hawaii, I'm the only Native Hawaiian I'm aware of. And so it's important about what we say and how we represent our community. So I'm just really glad to be around really good company on this stage. Thank you for, we can represent our people who aren't able to be here. My name is Katie Kamelamela. I live on Hawaii Island in the middle of the ocean. We have a really big mountain. It is sometimes called the biggest mountain if you measure it from the bottom of the ocean to the top, called Mauna Kea. Mauna Kea is really important, maybe not just for the astronomy it may be known for globally, but it shields us from hurricanes. When a hurricane comes, we depend on the mountain to keep us safe. And that's a different way of thinking about the function of our mountain. It doesn't just create water for us, which is our life-giving source in the middle of the ocean, but it also protects us from supernatural events. I'm currently an assistant professor at Arizona State University, conducting research out of the Center for Global Discovery of Conservation Science in Hawaii. And my research amplifies the contemporary relationship that Native Hawaiians have with our forests in recording over 160 plants that we currently gather for cultural and economic purposes. And a lot of these plants are the livelihoods of our community, but they're not seen because, well, they're not seen for their cultural importance, but they're elevated for their economic tourism income. And so sometimes a lot of what you see from Hawaii does come from our culture, but it's like a lot of sequence on it. So we have to come back and share the root meaning of why we do what we do. And that's important because being Indigenous is not a performative state, it's a ceremonial state. And what me and my friends say is that we walk in ceremony every day. I may not have the garb that you might want me to be wearing or expect somebody to be wearing that it's Indigenous, but I'm still a representative of my community and our words. My project for Mountain Sentinels was, Native Hawaiians as other Indigenous people experience great tragedy with diseases. Obviously, COVID-19 was a big one. And so I was working with the Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander COVID Task Force. And it was a really sensitive subject because 80% of our Native Hawaiian population passed away during like a 100-year-long pandemic. And so it was really critical for us to bring these stories forward, and the idea of vaccination still being a hot topic. So what I did for my project is, we always say, listen to the youth. And so I thought that it would be really nice for our youth to engage with the topic of how are we keeping ourselves healthy during COVID, to inspire their parents to listen to their children and what's important. And the biggest payback from that project were parents telling me how the kids were looking forward to the contest so that they could share their story from their perspective. And we had all different types of media. Yeah, I can't think of the Japanese word right now, but yeah. We had all different types of media, and it was really interesting to see not just the perspective of the children, but how their perspectives started to impact larger Native Hawaiian health organizations to push their messages forward. And that's something we don't really think about. There is the idea in the slide that people who are young now, and I learned yesterday there's a difference between a child and youth, which is really cool. But the children are going to be the decision makers, and us, we were all children at one point, and look at us now, United Nations type action. It's pretty amazing. But in Hawaii, I hope all of you who have been and who dream and who don't know about us are able to come and experience our mountains from our snow-capped peaks all the way down to our, oceans, and understand that unlike the continent where you can drive 4 hours in the same climate, you can drive 5 minutes away and be in a totally different area because of the extreme nature. And I believe that we're all reflections of our landscape, and our personalities are reflections of our relationship with our landscapes. And when I hear the policy being talked about, I'm uplifted to hear that within the language being used on this stage. And I'm actually surprised because at our local level, we're still struggling to be seen, not as a postcard, but as peoples with a living tradition. Thank you. So I guess if anybody has any questions, we can take them right now. We have some time, so we can do that. Yeah. We'll go Buffalo Child and then
Hey, thank you. I'm Indigenous, and my uncles were medicine men. My dad's side, my mother's side, they're all medicine people. And I used to go out with my uncles, and sometimes my mouth would be blah, blah, blah. And my uncles would say, they'd show me a little love. They'd say, Wapama agoma. They'd say, watch this, watch this. And they'd get my interest. They'd tell me, use your eyes, watch, listen, your eyes first, And so that's the way we learn. We use our eyes. Our eyes are our first teacher. And then some of the things I heard about the stories of the environment and the places. Our people were always here. And when we wanted food, we went out to get food. We wanted water, we went out to get water. We needed shelter, we got stuff for shelter. We needed something for clothing, we went out. We had an area here, and we went out and got things, and then we came back, and we were self-sustaining. And that was a way to keep the environment healthy. But today you have a world where you bring the environment to you. You bring your toilet into your house, and you have to create an infrastructure. Now you got plumbing, now you got toilet, you got waste, you got water coming. And then you got food, you bring a refrigerator, you bring your water in the infrastructure with everything. All of a sudden you have clutter, and it takes it away from the environment. When you take everything away from the environment, you create a disharmony in the environment. So there has to be some balance, The other way was a way of balance. And I think that we can't always go back to the old way, but we can make some compromises, and that will help the environment, The thing that I heard most of all that I really liked here was it's like a communication network, sharing the success stories, You don't have to reinvent the wheel. The wheel's already there, but you share the wheel. So you make a network of communication for the land erosion, for the tree planting, for sharing your teachers. And you follow up with each mountain community. So maybe you guys should put together a list of all these different mountain communities and network with them. And then when you share it, you share what your problems are, and these ones here share back with you, and sometimes they can share their teachers. I don't know what I'm saying, but I just listened to what you guys said. Hi, hi, ho, ho. Thank you.
Ahoy, Buffalo Child, thank you so much. We have people taking notes, and we'll be sure to do that. Thank you for your reflection as a person of this land, representing the people of this land, and being present for us and supporting us.
Thank you for all sharing your experiences here today. And also, I think Buffalo Child and I had some similar veins in thought around collaboration. So I want to hear from you all on your perceived avenues of collaboration and what you deem are really beneficial ways for collaboration with our mountain communities, specifically our Indigenous mountain communities. Thank you.
There are a number of projects that are funded by the Canadian Mountain Network. There are 7 hubs. The hubs include salmon, caribou,
Bison, obviously biodiversity, and there's other folks working on climate change as well. So it's a broad range of topics that the Canadian Mountain Network is tackling.
and within the 7 hubs, there are a number of community science-based research and Indigenous ancestral knowledge research projects that are funded within each of those hubs. They cover regional and even national scale in how big this the research is being conducted. The other thing in that, in regards to collaboration, there is a network across Canada of people like myself, Lawrence, Norma, that are working with land guardians. So these are the youth. These are the ones that are full of energy at 17, 18 to 30 years old. These land guardians, there's a whole network from people that are the land guardians and ocean guardians that are looking after waters from the Pacific all the way across the mountain communities, across the prairies, up and through to Nunavut, into the snow and ice, down over across the Great Lakes, down over through to Atlantic Canada. These young land guardians are the ones that we are investing lots of energy and time in. And you want to talk about network collaboration? Listen to them talk when they get together. You just got to applaud their energy, and you just know that the 7 generations ahead are going to be in good hands when you see and hear them talk.
I also wanted to mention that the Mountain Sentinels Network is centering this process of braiding knowledge in mountains worldwide. It's an open network, so anyone who wants to be a part is absolutely welcome. You can visit our booth or drop us an email. And the Mountain Partnership was a supporter, a collaborator on our proposal that was funded. So we thank them, and we appreciate that they value this work. And we hope to work with them as well. But so that, I think, is an answer, hopefully, to your question about a network that's trying to center these issues across mountains.
I was trying to decide if I wanted to answer. I just want to stress the importance of having community participation in any collaborative efforts between mountain communities. You don't just want officials at the table, you don't just want researchers at the table. You need your community members. It's so important, and it's deeply appreciated when you have that. What I thought was so cool about being a Mountain Sentinels Fellow was that we were all in very different communities all over the world, meeting for Zoom calls and working on our separate projects, but we found so much in common and were able to share resilient strategies through the different things that we were facing in the pandemic and with climate change. It was a really valuable resource, and I just appreciated that network, and I think it's a great model.
I'm just going to answer from the perspective of Hawaii. I'm kind of hearing your question a little bit differently of like how to work with Indigenous communities through networks. So in Hawaii, we have a network called Pua'aino Uluawamo, which means people of the country who are uplifting the nation is what I'm going to insert there. You can see it's pretty big, but that network, they only go to communities when they're invited. So they don't approach communities to work with them. People hear about the work that they do and then invite them. Similarly, my protocol, even as an Indigenous researcher, academic, is I do not do research in Hawaii in my own communities unless I am invited. So people are like, how do you do this? Which I think is what your question is. And it's to show up. What does show up mean? It means you show up and you identify what capacity you're able to actually bring in authenticity to that community. And you need to be really clear, not just within yourself, but if you have family members, what your relationship is going to be with that community, because sometimes it is consuming. But that's the type of dedication people in this room have to their communities. But I think the Hawaii network internally is unique. And as a Polynesian, as a Pacific person, what's really important for me and what I've seen work really well is when Polynesians get together, because our culture has been fragmented by colonization and the capture of land, we are able to put together the stories of our people. Like they have, like people in New Zealand have a piece of our story, and then we have a piece of their story. It's like over 600 years of oral traditions. So it's really important, not just for researchers to connect with these Indigenous networks, but I would even emphasize for researchers to create room, or policymakers to create room for Indigenous peoples to connect with each other before research starts. Because we always talk about the stories, but they're not stories, they're dissertations. They're dissertations in a form that's unrealized by academia, which is just another form of storytelling. So that's what I have for offering. Are there any other questions in the audience? Rick?
Just one comment from a third party that participated in the summit in Basalt. Oh, thank you. To let you all know, these guys are the real deal. They came here and had all kinds of issues logistically to get here for 3 days prior to this event, and it was great. And Basalt thanks them very much. We learned a lot that we're going to use in the Mid-Valley and regionally. And I think what I'm hearing, and I'm hoping this question can be answered, education seems to be a common theme. The UN talked about it with engaging youth. You guys have talked about it from planting forests. We've talked about it with education in the outdoor environment, the recreationalists, the impact they're getting to us. So I see this going forward with a multi-pronged kind of focus on that, which then strengthens the idea of getting the hubs together, in my opinion. That seems to be a real common thread. So I would just ask you to continue your effort and come back and see us over and over. Thank you again.
Yes.
I just had a question about the difference between recreating on the land and knowing the land like the back of your hand, or knowing the land as paper, or knowing the land in these boxes that we tend to put ourselves in. So how do we take steps forward in order to know the land, educate the youth in a way when we have created a system that puts us in these boxes for so much of our lives?
Sure. In Canada, like, we had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. It was really a study of what happened in residential schools. And that sort of really kicked off a lot of things, or it really pushed a lot of buttons across a lot of the academia, government, and in academia in particular. Universities are really trying to make more space for Indigenous, not only Indigenous research, but Indigenous scholars and students. And I think that is a really helpful process. Of course, obviously, I think something we always have to be very keen and remember that communities are under numerous challenges. And so you never sign up to be a chief. You're on call 24/7, literally, and you're responding to anything and everything. And I think the capacity of these small communities is something that we have to really be mindful of. My mom just recently passed away, but she's a trapper, and she lived on land all her life. And she tried to go out into the broader society, but and she loved working with her hands. She tried to be a cut and skid person, but she couldn't find work at that in the 80s, right? So there were obviously forestry companies didn't hire women. So she had to go back trapping, and she loved it, right? So, and that's where much of my desire to engage in this work comes from. And I think that she and her guide was her grandmother, my Gokum, and she was a very interesting person. She never actually spoke English, and the reason why is that she understood that what impact that had on our culture if she spoke English, and she never spoke it to us. But I lost my language at a young age because obviously we had to go and engage in these systems. But I think there's a resurgence. And I think things are coming back around. And I think in terms of these alliances and these partnerships, it's really critical that that there's space created for these things. So, much.
I'll just add, I like that thinking that this coming from this this floor of minds and in regards to thinking forward, planning for the next step for the youth to move forward. I really strongly feel that my grandmothers, my grandfathers never ever told me a trail to go on that wasn't safe. They set me out to do something. Sometimes I had to go 10, 12 miles with a pack on my back and get what needed to be done. They never ever sent me on a path that was not safe. So this kind of planning that you're doing here, you want to have that kind of path laid out for the young people, for the ones that are going to be decision makers, that they, when they get to what they need to do, that they know that they're on a safe path. The way that you're looking at the land, bring into your heart, bring into your mind that you're a caretaker. You're caring for that land that you're on. If you're going out on that land to play, how are you playing? If you have time to play. If you have too much time to play, that means take away half of that time and donate it to somebody else so that they can plant trees in their communities on the mountain areas. I thank that seat right there. It's sort of taken over as Lawrence's office space. We thank that seat here. This is our mountain seat in our discussion. We thank all of the mountains that we come from around the world for caring for us, and also with our care that they will care for the generations ahead. Tlahu Shonidan.
If people have other questions, we'll be around. And I'm just gonna answer you really quick because that was like my caveat to get 1 second in. But it really comes down to, in my understanding, being able to read the sky, knowing that that cloud's coming and it's gonna be here in 10 minutes, so you have to pack up your camp. It's about looking at the movement on the water, and you know what type of fish is there because the type of ripples that is going on. And you know what time of season it is to harvest that. Like, that's the intimacy of family. Think about knowing the personalities of your mother, father, grandfather, children. That's the difference between a map and knowing the land on the back of your hand. Thank you for having us.